Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We have an all-new story to share, so let's dive in. My name is Andrew, and if there's one lesson life has taught me, it's that the smallest things, those easily dismissed, can eventually become fractures that break a relationship apart. One topic that rarely gets discussed among men is territoriality. If a man dares to express discomfort about another man getting too close to his wife, he's immediately labeled as insecure. That word, insecure, is thrown around so often that many men have learned to suppress their concerns, pretending nothing bothers them, even when it does. But the reality is, most men have a protective nature. They seek respect, which simply translates to, if I'm committed to you and have chosen to build a life with you, I expect the same loyalty and respect in return. I've been married to Deborah for many years, and overall, things were good. Like any couple, we faced our fair share of ups and downs, but I never had a reason to question her loyalty, at least not until that one evening. I was relaxing while Deborah sat beside me, casually texting someone. It seemed like an ordinary moment, nothing out of place, until my eyes caught the name on her screen. It was a man she had once admitted having a significant crush on before we started dating. She never kept it a secret. I still remember the way she casually mentioned it back then, laughing as if it were trivial. "Oh, I had the biggest crush on him," she had said, but that was a long time ago. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Everyone has past crushes. It's completely normal. But now, that same man was back in her life, and she was actively chatting with him. I couldn't help but wonder, was it just casual conversation, or was there something more beneath the surface? I could have asked her right then, but I hesitated. She wasn't hiding her phone. She wasn't acting suspicious. If I confronted her, what would I even say? That I happened to glance at a name and suddenly felt uneasy? It didn't seem like enough. I knew that bringing it up without any concrete reason might make her dismiss it as paranoia. She might even get defensive, and the last thing I wanted was an unnecessary argument. So instead, I chose to wait and observe. I remained silent, but my mind couldn't stop spinning with questions. What if this led to something deeper? What if staying quiet now became a regret later? I didn't have the answers then, but looking back, I should have trusted my instincts. When we began trying for a baby, things started to change. Initially, we were optimistic, but then came the first miscarriage. I was heartbroken, but for Deborah, it was soul-crushing. She cried for days, barely speaking. I did my best to comfort her, holding her at night, reassuring her that we would keep trying, but she barely responded. Then, when she finally carried a pregnancy to term, we thought we had overcome the worst. We were wrong. The baby was stillborn. That day at the hospital, I saw something in her eyes dim. I was grieving too, but for Deborah, it was as if a part of her had completely shut down. At first, I believed she just needed time, but as the weeks passed, her sorrow shifted into something else. She became distant, answering in short sentences, avoiding eye contact, and isolating herself in the bedroom. Then, things escalated. She started snapping at me over trivial things that had never mattered before. Though she never outright blamed me, it felt as though she did. Simple conversations turned into arguments. No matter what I did, it was wrong. Yet I kept trying. I told myself that she was hurting, that this was temporary. Then she made new friends. One had never been married. The other was divorced. Almost overnight, they became the center of her world. She spent more time with them than with me, going out more frequently. I didn't want to be the overbearing husband who dictated who she could spend time with, so I let it slide. Later, I realized she wasn't just meeting up for friendly hangouts. She was partying, clubbing, staying out until the early hours. At first, I convinced myself that if this brought her happiness, then perhaps it was good for her. But the more it continued, the more uneasy I became. One evening, as she got ready for yet another night out, I watched her fix her hair in the mirror. I finally spoke up. "Deborah, this isn't right. This kind of behavior. It's not appropriate for a married woman." She turned to me, her expression shifting instantly as if I had just said something so absurd that Deborah burst into laughter. You can't stop me from having fun, she said, grabbing her purse before walking out the door. That night, I stayed awake, waiting. She didn't return until morning. No apologies, no explanations. One evening, Deborah approached me with an announcement. "We've been invited to a wedding," she said. It was from a mutual acquaintance, someone we both knew but weren't particularly close to. The wedding was taking place across the state, which meant making travel arrangements, booking flights, and dedicating an entire weekend to it. It felt like too much hassle for an event I had no real interest in. Without much thought, I told her, "We're not going." But she didn't accept my refusal so easily. She seemed unusually excited about this wedding, speaking about it as if it were a close family member ceremony. She started listing reasons why we should attend. "It'll be a great getaway," she insisted, making it sound more like a vacation than a wedding. She mentioned how it could help us reconnect, reminding me that we hadn't spent quality time together outside the house in a while. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, that we hardly attended social events as a couple anymore. I still wasn't convinced. Weddings weren't my thing. The idea of sitting through a long ceremony, pretending to be invested in the lives of people I barely interacted with, didn't appeal to me. Besides, things between us hadn't been great since we lost a baby. There was an unspoken tension in our marriage, and a wedding felt like just another opportunity to put on a facade that everything was fine when, in reality, it wasn't. When I turned her down again, she shifted her approach. "Fine," she said with a shrug, acting as if she didn't care anymore. "Can I just go alone then?" Her request caught me off guard. I hadn't expected her to suggest going by herself. Instinctively, I said no. She wasn't happy about it, but she didn't argue either. Instead, she dropped the subject. Or so I thought. Over the next few days, she casually slipped the wedding into conversation, subtly planting the idea in my head. She'd talk about how fun it would be, how many of our old friends would be there, and how nice it would be to escape our daily routine for a bit. Little by little, what initially felt like an obligation started sounding more like an opportunity, a chance to reset. And that's what I wanted more than anything, to feel like we were on the same team again. Eventually, I gave in. But looking back, if I had known what was coming, I never would have agreed. We traveled together. The flight was mostly silent. Deborah spent most of the time on her phone, while I remained lost in thought. The wedding itself was fine. We sat with a few familiar faces, exchanged pleasantries, and went through the motions. Then, at some point, I spotted him, her old crush. And suddenly, everything clicked. Her relentless enthusiasm about attending this wedding. It all made sense now. She had known he would be here. At first, I tried to keep my emotions in check. But then, she began bringing him up in conversation. I kept my responses brief, unwilling to play along. Later, during the reception, she excused herself to go to the restroom. I barely thought anything of it, until the moment the guests were invited to join the couple on the dance floor. I glanced around, searching for Deborah, and then I saw her dancing with him. The way they moved together, the way they leaned in, the way she laughed. It was a kind of chemistry that made them look like a couple. I got up, walked over, and pulled her aside. I expected her to look guilty, to at least acknowledge that she had crossed a line. But instead, she met my gaze with irritation, as if I were the one in the wrong. "Let me be," she said dismissively. "I'm not your child." And just like that, she turned her back on me and walked right back to him. I stood there humiliated. Every moment of disrespect I had endured over the past year flashed through my mind. The passive-aggressive remarks, the emotional distance, the late nights out. And now this. I was done. Without another word, I left the venue, stepping out into the cool night air. The hotel wasn't far, but the walk felt endless. When I arrived at our room, I grabbed my phone, opened the airline app, and booked the earliest flight home. I wasn't going to sit through another empty conversation about how it didn't mean anything. I was done with whatever Deborah had become. I packed my bag, checked out the hotel, and headed straight for the airport. It wasn't until I was standing in line, waiting to board my flight, when my phone started ringing. It was Deborah. I had no interest in hearing whatever she had to say. So I let the call go unanswered. Then another call came, and another. She kept calling, but I never picked up. By the time I landed and switched my phone back on, there were dozens of messages waiting for me. At first, I thought maybe she had come to her senses. Maybe she had realized what she had done and was reaching out to apologize. But as I scrolled through, I saw exactly what I should have expected. She wasn't sorry. Not even close. Wow, you're really this weak. You're such a crybaby. You always take things too seriously. You're so insecure it's pathetic. You're soft, Andrew. Too soft. No real man would act like this. Reading those words was like a final blow to something already shattered. I took a deep breath, then typed out one last message. Enjoy your life. Our marriage is over. And that was it. By the time Deborah returned home, I was long gone. I had packed my things, moved out, and left nothing behind but a reality she had created for herself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. At first, she acted like she didn't care. If anything, she doubled down. The messages she sent after realizing I had moved out were filled with even more insults. She mocked me for leaving the wedding early, laughed at how I flew home without her, as if I had thrown some childish tantrum. In her mind, I was the problem. I was insecure. I was controlling. I was the one who had ruined our marriage, not her choices. And for a while, I just let her talk. I didn't engage. I had already made my decision. I was done being treated like an afterthought. A few days later, my lawyer sent over the divorce papers. That was when everything changed. Suddenly, the insults stopped. The arrogance vanished. The same woman who had ridiculed me for walking away was now desperate to talk. The endless taunts that filled my phone were replaced with messages like, "Please, can we talk?" I didn't mean those things. At first, I ignored them. I had spent so much time trying to make this marriage work, while she brushed aside my feelings. Now that I had finally drawn the line, I wasn't about to let her manipulate me into undoing it. But she didn't stop. She called over and over again. When I wouldn't answer, she started sending voice notes. Her tone had changed completely. She wasn't mocking me anymore. She sounded shaken, like she was finally realizing that I wasn't bluffing. In one of her messages, she admitted, "I've been acting tough because I didn't want to seem weak. But the truth is, I don't want to lose you." She confessed that she had let things spiral out of control, that she had been reckless, that she had pushed me away without realizing how much damage she was causing. She said she finally understood how deeply she had hurt me. And now I'm at a crossroads. Divorce isn't simple. It's not just about signing papers and moving on. It's an emotional process. And despite everything, this was still the woman I had built a life with. But could I ever trust her again? Could I believe she had truly changed? Or was this just desperation talking? That's the question I keep struggling with. On one hand, I know that a marriage can't survive without respect. Looking back, I can't ignore how many times she dismissed my feelings. When I first saw she was texting the man she used to have a crush on, I let it go. I didn't want to seem possessive. When she started going out more, spending time with single friends who encouraged her reckless choices, I told myself to be patient. But when she danced with that man at the wedding, right in front of me, I finally hit my breaking point. Walking away felt like the only option left. But now, she's begging me to reconsider. Now, she wants to fix things. So the question is, can I ever trust her again? If I take her back, what message does that send? That she can disrespect me and our marriage as much as she wants, and I'll always be there to forgive her? Or is there actually a chance that she's realized how far she went and genuinely wants to change? Because if she truly regrets it, if she's really willing to do the work, then maybe, just maybe, there's a way forward. But how do I know she won't slip back into old habits the moment she feels comfortable again? That's the part one can't figure out. So now, over to you. What do you think? Should I go through with the divorce, knowing there's a real possibility that she's already crossed the line with her old crush? Or should I give her a chance? Sit down with her, make it clear that her actions have consequences, and see if she finally understands? I've been going back and forth on this, and honestly, I need to hear some different perspectives. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.